Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, Trevor?
What is going on? Before we dive into today's topics, which are going to include Neon White, Lightyear, Stranger Things Season 4, Part 1, and the film Elvis, a little bit of housekeeping for you. That Bond show is all wrapped up. You can go catch the finale episode that went live this last Saturday, where myself and Logan sat down and kind of did a recap of our thoughts on the entire franchise, entire series, as well as talked about, our postulations of what the series might do next. So you can go check that out. And yeah, that was a half a year long endeavor that we have wrapped up. So shout out to that project being all said and done. Go check out any episodes you might have missed or you might be interested in, or that finale episode. You can also check out Cameron's ongoing series Friday Night Dying Light as he continues to play through Friday Night with his Dying Light 2 with his Friday Night Lights themed mantra of clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Anything you want to say about that one, Cam?
Look forward to some good episodes. We got a lot of good stuff happening.
Cool. And lastly, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So kick us off with the new game you've been playing that you were very excited to chat about, Neon White. And kind of for those that don't know, because I feel like this is a little bit more on the obscure side of things, tell us like kind of the broad, like, what is the game about? What's the pitch of the game before diving into like what you really like about it, or
Sure.
what's kind of hooked you?
I'll give you the quick elevator pitch. So basically, the elevator pitch is thematically, it is a game about how demons are breaking into heaven, and so heaven has plucked certain very effective killer sinners called neons out from hell in order to essentially push back demons back to hell. That's the thematic premise. What it actually is as a game is a platforming action game where you run through a course where you have to kill all the demons, which can be accomplished by physical violence, or some of them you can jump on top of them. There are these balloon dudes you can do that with. And essentially, you try to beat a certain amount of time that it takes you to complete the course. And so it's a matter of learning kind of like your routes. You learn a route that you run on. You learn the kind of combination of weapons and abilities that are needed to get through it, and then you try to do it and beat a certain time, and you get ranked by medal. So bronze just to complete it, silver after, and then silver, gold, and they call it ace medal, which is like a platinum. It, however, has a leaderboard, both a global leaderboard as well as a friends leaderboard. So if you're friends with somebody on Steam and they have beaten that level as well, you can compare times. And so brings a competitive aspect to that game that is very addictive.
Yeah. So you're playing on Steam because I know.
Yeah.
I listened to the Kind of Funny team talk about it, and like I know Andy's playing on Steam, and I know Barrett like is playing on Switch, and both of them have been chasing those leaderboards and like been global #1 and stuff like that, because that's
So
right up their alley stuff.
Barrett has Andy has not, because Andy is just trying to beat friends. It's like PC wise, the skill gap in between PC and Switch is
in their Gamescast, Andy said for at least one of the levels he had like the global #1 for like 3 hours on one of those levels and was like, this is the
oh
coolest.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's accurate. But I was mostly referencing Barrett and how Barrett has like kept like global scores. The skill gap between Switch and PC is vast.
Of course.
Yeah, no, and I think that's just because most of the people who are playing the game are playing PC. I'm not referencing like
I would say
Switchy.
I would say no. It's way easier to maneuver those kinds of games with mouse and keyboard than it is with controller and analog sticks. So like it would not surprise me, as is often the case in those kinds of games, when like the console leaderboard is just of a different skill set than PC. But so it's a
Yeah.
like an action platformer where you like there is a story, but like really the hook of the game is the speed running element and just trying to like continually improve your time and get better and get faster and find like the little secrets and shortcuts and all that stuff to shave time off.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, it is all about beating your best time. Like there are times when I am going through, I'm trying to get an ace level, and when you complete your silver medal rank, it puts out a ghost. So like in racing games where you are trying to beat your best time, and it symbolizes that by a ghost racing alongside you. They have those in there as well as like other things. So as you unlock kind of like higher up, you gain what's called insight, which is you start with a level with 0 insight, and then you can upgrade it to a max at 4 insight, and at 4 insight you kind of get like all the details about the as far as like there is a hint on how to cut off time in just about every level, and so that becomes available for you to see. A lot of times, like I found myself being like, oh, I've already been doing the hint.
Cool. Always helpful.
Yeah, and well, then it's like, oh, but I'm still not getting like the best time in this level. So where am I going wrong on it?
Mm.
And there are some levels where they get pretty complicated on like your route to how to complete it, because some of them can get very specific, especially later in the game when you like there's a specific route that you need to take to beat the level. And the time wise, it's determined basically just how fast you can launch yourself into the next like series of steps on that level,
Mm-hmm.
like how quickly you can transition between these separations between the steps. It's very good. It's all first person. I very very much enjoy it. I haven't beaten it just yet. I'm at, gosh, I want to say I have two. I have like two missions. So missions are basically a series of levels, um, and they can range. Most of them are 10. Some of them are like 3 or 4. Those are like specialty ones. And then of course, there's an entire section of gift giving where by giving gifts to other NPCs, you unlock dialogue to find out more, because you play as White, who has amnesia. He doesn't know anything about his previous life. He just knows that he's very good at killing stuff. But it seems like everybody else around you knows who you are. And so it's like a question of, it's like, wait, but then you're told, no, this is your first judgment, which is like the judgment days are basically the event where they pull up neons to do this work. Um and yeah, and it's a whole thing about like finding out like they're like heaven's a bit fishy. Like there's not everything's very like not everything is as honest about how things are in the first place. And that includes some of the other like NPC characters, because it's like very obvious that they know who you are, but you don't know who they are. And so you're trying to figure that out as well. And gift giving lets you open up new dialogues with them to learn more about them and about their relationship with you. And also unlock some really cool side quests. They're called side quests, but what they really are is just like bonus levels that are themed around like one of them, like one person has it where like it is really just all about traversal, using one ability at a time to kind of make your way through the level. And messing up is dangerous, because basically if you don't stay like on a tight path, there are spikes that will kill you.
Hmm.
And then there's another person who it's really about like traversing long distances and getting your timing right when you use the abilities of the weapons. So the abilities and the weapons come out as a single card.
Mm-hmm.
This is where people got really confusing, where they thought it was a deck builder, myself included. Um, However, it's not a deck builder. You collect these. Your abilities are limited by a stock, and that stock is represented by a card. And so you can pick up 3 stocks at a time, and they are split between them. Each item being a weapon, like a pistol, shotgun, machine guns, rifle, etc. But then they also have, and that's their left click, and that has like a like ammo count. Then their right click, which consumes the entirety of the card, is a special ability. The pistol allows you to do a double jump. The machine gun shoots a bomb that you can bounce off of. And the rifle does a dash attack. The shotgun does what's called a fireball, where basically you propel yourself straight forward. whichever direction you're looking as a fireball, so you can damage enemies while you're doing it. It's a whole thing, and it's brilliant. The bazooka or RPG launcher is also a grappling hook, and so these weapons all have different abilities. They all have different kind of like ways of going about it, and depending on how you use them, they can accelerate your run. You can slow down. You can mess up your run entirely because you right clicked when you should have just been shooting. You should have just shot that thing, and now you don't have a way of getting past this next obstacle because you were supposed to use your right click to get past the obstacle, not kill the demon. Um, it's super stylish. It reminds me a lot of Killer 7 from the PS2 era.
Okay.
As far as like kind of like this not necessarily because it's cell shaded, but because just kind of like this I think it's just this assassin style of um like almost like a Kill Bill level kind of like atmosphere of character traits and specialties and things like that, but also because like each of the characters is known as like a neon white, neon green, neon violet, neon yellow, neon red, etc. And each of the characters are voiced by. There's a couple of new voice actors, as far as like, and when I say new, I don't mean like brand new. This is their first project. I mean they've been working for maybe the last 5 to 10 years, but notably Steve Bloom, who is one of like the longest reigning voice actor kings of all time,
Mm-hmm.
voice Spike Spiegel, like literally has been in the business as long as it used to be. You could only do like X number of projects a year in voice acting, and so people used to do voice acting under a pseudonym. And so for years, people are like, "Oh, well, who's this other guy who voices Spike Spiegel who sounds like Steve Bloom?" And Steve Bloom, for legal reasons, used to have to be like, "Oh no, that's my friend so and so. I know him. Don't worry." But in reality, it was just Steve Bloom. But for legal reasons, he couldn't claim credit for it, and that's since changed. So like, you have people who've been in the business as long as Steve Bloom has, as voice actors in it, and so it's been very cool to see kind of like a old school like '90s era anime veteran cast with a couple of new voices in it, and it's been super cool. As somebody who like really like the story is pretty anime, as far as like the gift giving and the kind of like personality traits and the kind of like tropes are very anime. Um, but honestly, I'm not really too like I'm not bothered by it, and I'm not really necessarily excited by it either. I think that it works well for the medium that it is, and it plays into itself. There's a lot of self references to into like genre specific stuff in general, and kind of like fun call outs to certain things. It's been very very good. Um, Gameplay is definitely what you come for. It's what you stay for. But there's a lot of other fun stuff as well.
Cool. I know I pulled Steve Bloom's like credentials and stuff for a recent That Deep Plus show. I just couldn't remember which one. It was for when we did the Star Wars Rebels episode recently, because he plays, of course, Zeb on Star Wars Rebels as well as one of his latest latest well-known roles, alongside, as you said, like Spike, obviously Wolverine, all that stuff. So cool that they had like a
yeah.
oh I mean yeah, like one of the little trivia things that we had was that he won the Guinness World Record in 2012 for the most video game voice acting credits, which don't know how that continues to play here in 2022, but 10 years ago he was the top of the, or at least the most of the pile.
And that's just that's just video
game,
games.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want to talk about voice, he probably has more voice credits than the only people I can think who might have more voice credits are people who've voiced like Mickey Mouse.
I wouldn't even say like Mickey Mouse notably is like, oh, that was like that person played the character for many many years, versus like a Steve Bloom. I would say like a Frank Welker is probably like one that he's got probably credits in a billion things, because he's pretty much any one of, he's like, it's him and D. Bradley Baker who are the animals in any comic or cartoon that you've ever seen or watched, as well as like Frank Welker also being like not Shaggy, but the other guy in Scooby-Doo, for many,
Freddy.
many years. Freddy, yeah, Fred. Like he's definitely up there in terms of like longevity of a career. But yeah, Steve Bloom, yeah, it was one of those, started in 92, wasn't Wolverine in the original X-Men animated series, a lot of people think he was, or like because a lot of people associate with him with Wolverine. But it was really like projects after that that he started, and especially on the video game side that really started getting him linked to the Wolverine character. But anyway, um, cool. So what's the like? I know, just kind of bouncing this off of the conversation that they had on Gamescast, where there was like there's a story there, but your mileage may vary. It sounded like the kind of anime story that you might really like link into. I think like Barrett was also really intrigued by it, and maybe even um, Blessing, but like Andy was just kind of skipping through it all. Which kind of camp do you fall into?
Experiencing everything about it,
Yeah.
like going through, playing through everything, experiencing everything, trying to unlock everything. And I stand corrected. Steve Bloom is only the 15th most prolific voice, like with the number of voice acting credits. However, one of them I don't count because that's Trey Parker, and that's almost entirely his own show.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't necessarily count that. So
Well, I mean,
top
like
14.
I go off of typically like I rank like IMDb based on like the number of like different credits that they have instead of like because like sure Dan Castellaneta having done 700 episodes of The Simpsons is a lot, but when he hasn't done much else outside of that, and admittedly he
This
has.
is this is particularly character roles.
Okay.
Specifically. Also, same thing. I don't count Seth Green because most of those are from like Robot Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're the only like two voice actors for a show that does a lot of different roles, I don't necessarily know if I want to count you in this list.
Yeah.
But no, like I forgot John DiMaggio,
Yeah.
Mel Blanc, Tara Strong, Rob Paulson. Rob Paulson's done over 1,300, almost 1,350 voice acting credits.
Yeah, I just rewatched Goofy Movie because I'm going to be on another podcast this week talking about it, and Rob Paulson's in there as PJ, so it's fun. It's always fun hearing his voice.
Number one though, D. Bradley Baker with 2,307 characters.
That sounds about right. And I mean, but even there, like, how many of those are clone troopers? are just 500 different clone troopers over the course of the Clone Wars.
That or like 500 different like animals. Yeah.
Very cool. Fun little detour down voice actor lane. So is this the kind of game that because so much of the hook for you is tied into like just trying to do better, like one more run, do better, like figure out the optimal path, like even when you finish the story, do you think you're going to keep kind of with it for a little while to try and chase any of those leaderboards? Or are you just kind of like, are you at the point where you realize you're never going to reach the top of that mountain on Steam, and so you're just going to be like, it's fun, and then move on to the next thing?
It's tough to say. I think for me there is definitely a viability for wanting to go back and like do better. I don't think my thing is I'm not going to be the guy who tries to chase leaderboards. I never am. But there is an aspect of like I definitely want to ace, like get an ace medal on every level.
Okay.
I definitely want to do that. Now, whether or not I'm successful in doing that or I have the time to go back later this year, it's hard to say. Like starting next week after I get paid, like we're rolling into the second half of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And that means a lot more games are coming out. I have to pick up Fire Emblem Three Hopes, which is my big one for the kind of like summer season. Neon White coming out of nowhere for June was definitely a nice little addition for and I think I will beat it. I'm now to the point where like as long as I beat the level, I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm at some later tougher levels, and I kind of just want to get through and see the rest of the main story. I do want to go back and get the gifts and stuff and like unlock all the different dialogues and stuff for all the side characters, but it's just going to take time, and I don't know if I have all that much time.
Okay. And then so it is a first person, in many ways platforming kind of puzzle sometimes, where it's like you have to you're trying to figure out the optimal route. So what is the first person platforming like in the game? And I'm speaking to this because as we've touched on off air and through like the let's plays
Hmm.
and stuff, I went through and did end up playing Dying Light 2, and we'll talk about it eventually, like when you end up finishing the game and wrapping up Friday Night Dying Light. But like I hate the like when I have to do platforming in that one, when it's like, okay, I need to be very precise with platforming, because I just that like first person platforming for me never feels great. So I'm curious how it feels by comparison in Neon White. Is it very easy to miss and mess something up, and then, well, a run's done, but because it's a short run and it's not like a prolonged thing, like for me, it's when I'm trying to platform up the top of a skyscraper and fall, and now I have to spend 3 or 4 minutes just getting back to the base of that
Ah,
platforming thing, drives me crazy.
yeah, no, no, definitely not like that. It's I will say it's floaty.
Okay.
As far as like the kind of control scheme, so it's not as heavy as like a Dying Light 2, where you will sink like a rock once you're off the ledge of something. The and there's a way of like, it feels like there's a ways to slow yourself down to try to like recover. There's a lot of recovery options. I usually just will hit the F button to reset the level.
Hmm.
Because it's that much easier. I'm on a run, like I'm trying to beat a time.
Yeah.
Um, Now I will say, like, because they're such shorter levels, you don't really get to that point where it's like a I will say there are some levels that I'm like, I definitely took multiple tries to getting through like one part of them. And I'd get to the last part and I would screw up and I'd be like, I can't believe I have to do that all over again. But in reality, if you can get through it once, you can kind of replicate it and get through it a second time, the third, fourth, etc. To the point where like, I can't believe I had a hard time with that
Hmm.
kind of levels of feelings afterwards. Uh yeah, it's not hard, and the addictive nature of the well, one more run, like, oh, I already know this level, I already beat it. I just want to beat it with a better time because I think I know a better route this time, and like the routes aren't so significantly different from themselves that it's just a matter of shaving off seconds, and it feels good. It does feel very very good. The abilities feel very good, but there is a bit of kind of getting lost in the sauce kind of feel. Like you get lost in the momentum of a run. And so like you realize, oh, I totally screwed that up. Like I botched that. I have to start over again. If that kind of thing will not bother you, like it doesn't bother me very much at all. If that doesn't bother you, you'll have a great time with this game. But if that bothers you at all, you will run into that plenty of times in this game. So that's
Yeah.
my kind of like my cautionary like label.
Yeah, even talking through that in Dying Light 2, there are like those challenge things that you can do that are bronze, silver, gold kind of thing, and it's you're doing a time trial thing or something like that. And it whenever those things exist in a game, and I can't just reload or restart in the middle of a thing if I screw up, always drives me crazy. And Dying Light 2 is that, where it's like, oh, I fell off the building, so now I have to like climb back up to the building to
Yeah,
get back
no,
on the path, and I've lost way too much time to make it worthwhile. But the game won't let me just like pause and restart the challenge. I have to just wait for the time to hit, like to tick down to like the bronze failed level or whatever. And it's like, don't ever do that, game developers. Like, give us like, if you're going to make those challenges and make them with the intent of replayability, make it very easy to get out and restart them.
sorry, not Dying Light. Neon White does that extremely
Yeah, sounds like it. I mean,
well.
you're saying all you had to do is push the F button, so
Mhm.
yeah, very
I've
easy
had
to.
times I had times where like I knew I can't like waste a second
Hmm.
on a run because I'm trying to beat this time. Um, and I know I can't beat it, and so I hit the space bar to start the level, and I didn't already have myself like on the W key to be push to go forward.
Hmm.
And so I saw my ghost get like a second head start on me, and I'm like, oops, nope, hit F.
Yep.
We go again. Like
Yep.
that happens all the time. Like, and it's a real simple, quick load. It's not too difficult. I like it. It's smooth as butter. Like it runs and plays and is smooth as butter, and I really enjoy it. So,
Cool. Cool. Any final thoughts on Neon White before we move on?
yeah, not bad for a dead guy. That's my favorite thing. He says it at the end of every level, like every mission you beat. He does like a cool flip, throws out his hand and a finger gun, and just goes, "Not bad for a dead guy."
All
It's like
right.
I like that. I like that a lot.
All right.
I might put that on my tombstone.
Fair enough. Um,
So when people go like, "Oh yeah, Cameron did this," it's like not bad for a dead guy.
yeah, there you go. All right, let's bounce over then to Lightyear, the first of the movies I'm bringing to the table today. I saw this last weekend, so it's opening weekend, um, and enjoyed it. It doesn't reach the highs of the highest Pixar movies, but it's definitely a fun like Pixar take on the sci-fi action movie. Um, for those that don't know, it is the like pitch is in 19, and this is basically the first thing that the movie shows is like a little like placard of this of like in 1995 Andy, a boy named Andy, saw a movie or brought like got a toy from his favorite movie. This is that movie. So that this is basically like the in universe Buzz Lightyear movie that inspired the toy line and event I think eventual cartoon series and whatever. It's like the Buzz Lightyear toy is based off of this character from the Buzz Lightyear movie. Um and it's definitely like an interesting like premise to kind of recontextualize the Lightyear character and give it a new like a new coat of paint and tell just a more straightforward sci-fi story. It's also I've never seen Interstellar, but like from what I understand, a lot of people kind of describe it as like Interstellar for kids, because the premise is touching on the idea of time displacement a lot, where kind of a mission goes wrong, and Buzz, in order to try and like fix what went wrong, is becomes a test pilot for like an experimental fuel cell. And each time he does, he's going on these like 4 minute, 5 minute missions to test the fuel cell. But because of how fast he's going, the rest of the world around him is aging years at a time, kind of thing. So he goes out on a 4 minute mission, comes back, and everybody has aged 4.5 years. And so he spends like a month in his time trying to like go on this mission over and over again, and like every new variation and trying to improve the thing. And meanwhile, like his friends, the people, the other people on this planet on this mission with him are building a life for themselves on this planet, and years go by, and he kind of misses all of that. And but he's like so dedicated to trying to finish the mission, and that's kind of where the thrust of the movie kind of goes from there. And it's definitely an interesting premise. Before seeing it, I did a That D Plus show on Beyond Infinity, which is like a Pixar documentary about the making of it. And one of the ideas that they touched on in that was the idea that like when they're working on a Pixar movie, they're heads down on the movie for 2-3 years at a time, and then they come out and the world has changed, and
Hmm.
people have had kids or like, and so it's like knowing that was like a conscious thing that they were thinking about as they made the movie definitely like put it into a different perspective. Obviously COVID puts it into a different perspective of seeing people for the first time after a couple of years, and how still life is felt, but also how things are clearly continuing to move forward. It's definitely like an interesting idea for a Pixar movie to explore, for any movie to explore, I think. um I don't
Hmm.
know if it does it as well or as interesting as I would have liked to kind of like really dive into the nooks and crannies of just how drastically like he doesn't he doesn't live with the extent existential nature of the fact that like his best friend has aged 60 years in a week or two of him going out and doing this mission over and over again. um and
Huh.
like it's like the his overall kind of like arc is much more like he wants to do things by himself, and that's how things kind of get screwed up in the first place, and he now has to be the one to fix it. And so his character growth and his arc is like realizing that he can actually rely on other people and form a team and stuff like that. And so it's not him dealing with this like passage of time that he is a man out of time among the universe around him, kind of thing, which I think would be
Wow,
a
that
potentially
sounds
more interesting.
yeah.
But it also would be like it's not necessarily like the easy action movie sell that this movie is trying to be. This is very much like Pixar's probably most like action filled movie of all their stuff. And it's like it's fun for the action that it does have. But I think like it introduces this like really interesting premise and then just doesn't go the interesting places I would want to see it go. Um but that, I mean, other than that, like it's like all of the Pixar staples are there. It looks beautiful. It definitely has some heart to it. Again, not as much as maybe some of the more pinnacle Pixar movies. It's probably like a middle of the road Pixar movie for me. Not as cynical as like the Cars franchise or something like that, but um definitely has some solid moments, especially Socks the cat is a lot of people's kind of fan favorite character and has a lot of great just like hilarious beats, in large part because so much of what that is of what that character is doing is just a deadpan robot cat in this like space faring world kind of thing, as well as the fact that like the cat will go out and do like I'm calculating beep boop beep boop beep boop beep boop, and it won't be like actual beeps and boops or whatever. It will just be the cat saying the lines beep boop beep boop beep boop. And there's like a lot of fun humor to be mined from just that kind of juxtaposition. um but yeah, it's fun. Chris Evans is a fun Buzz Lightyear, fun version of this character, and
Hmm.
there are definitely a million like nods to like the Buzz Lightyear we know from the Toy Story universe, and in look, in like lines and delivery beats and just moments that are like callbacks to Buzz Lightyear over the years. There's definitely a lot of fun to be had there. It feels like it's missing that like little bit of extra Pixar magic that could have
Hmm.
really made this feel like something special. Like I know one of the comparisons that I think it's either Dan Merle or the kind of funny people brought up was the idea of like the movie kicks off and you do see this like rapid kind of transition of time, um but you don't really feel the emotional weight of it because Buzz isn't feeling the emotional weight of it compared to something like the opening, of Up, where we see like the rapid impact of time and we feel it because we're feeling it through Carl feeling, the loss and the sadness of the end of that series. And so like and that is Carl living a life, whereas like this is Buzz living a month of his life while everybody else lives a life and he has no idea what they've been through on this alien planet.
It
um
it reminds me of like missing the point of like Interstellar. Like Interstellar, uh, the live film with Matthew McConaughey in it. There's an entire scene where the weight, like Matthew McConaughey and his team are talking about like time and making sure that they have enough time to accomplish the mission, et cetera, et cetera. They eventually get like a video from home, and like Matthew McConaughey, like the realization of how much time he's lost
mhm,
with his kids,
yeah,
like hits him in this existential way of just this dread and pain and sorrow at losing time
mhm,
and losing opportunities with his kids to try to like save them and humanity.
mhm,
And it's a whole thing about that. And like, so I feel like that moment in that movie, it's like a really cool sci-fi movie up to that point, and then like that point hits you and you realize it's just like the sacrifices we make for the people that we care about are oftentimes painful, and they're not considered sacrifices for no reason. It's not just for the people who are having to deal with the sacrifice of somebody else, it's also the actual emotional impact of that person's sacrifice.
yeah,
And it sounds like there's some set level of like existential existential like sorrow that is missing from something that has a premise like this.
Yeah, it's I mean, like, there definitely is the moment where he realizes what has passed and, like, when, that person that he knows, when he, like, comes back and sees how old she's gotten, or when he comes back from a mission and she's not there anymore. Like, he has that moment, but that's basically, like, the end of the first act into the rest of the movie, and it just continues being an action movie from there. So it's not like it is a sad scene and a sad sequence, but he doesn't really like
It
he's
doesn't
not
have lasting
he's not
impact.
living in it. And admittedly, again, this is a kids movie version of like an Interstellar kind of like plot beat, so it's not going to be the crying meme of Matthew McConaughey that like I can like, even though I've never seen the movie, I know that image of Matthew McConaughey just ugly crying. Um uh so like yeah, it doesn't live in it, and that's fine because yeah, that would be a very tough thing for I think like
For kids.
a kids movie that they're clearly, trying to like that is not the movie that Andy would have walked away from wanting the Buzz Lightyear action figure. Would be like, I'm going to be sad about this for the rest of this movie now. It is like, I'm going to do these crazy things and I'm going to experiment with the idea of like time travel or time displacement and stuff like that. Um, I'm gonna be action hero and space ranger and all that stuff. So like it makes sense within like the parameters that they kind of set up for the movie why it doesn't go those directions. I just think it could have benefited from potentially living in that just a little bit more, as
Well,
opposed to trying to be action with like, let's form a team and oh, the team's gonna be bumbling idiots, but we're gonna make it work by the end kind of thing.
I feel like that's such a missed opportunity because they explore those kinds of like deeper emotions and feelings in films like Coco
Hmm.
and in Up even.
Yep.
So like, that it's sad. It's sad for me as somebody who hasn't seen the film yet to be like, oh, okay, well, like that's weird that they didn't take that leap when they have a history of taking those leaps and making,
Hmm.
considering a film like Inside Out is literally just that massive leap. Like there's not much else going on except that leap of we're going to dive into these greater, deeper, inner personal questions in a fun, entertaining way for the entire family. Like that's all of Inside Out, and for them, Pixar, a studio that's known for storytelling these types of stories well, for them to not take that leap with this moment, is a little disappointing.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say disappointing. It's just it didn't go the places I think we are, yeah, in that vein. Like it's the things that like Pixar stand out or have made Pixar stand out are when they go above and beyond. Is like this is very like good and incredibly well made Disney Pixar kind of movie, but it isn't that like it isn't the beyond of To Infinity and Beyond, despite how many times they touch on that line as kind of a pitch point of the movie. Um, so
That's
yeah,
quite ironic.
yeah. Um, but yeah, those are my thoughts on Lightyear. If you end up seeing it, or I'm sure we'll eventually do a That D Plus show on it at some point. So yeah, and to just to speak on it, like I didn't find myself missing Tim Allen at all, especially based on like the parameters again that they've set up for the movie of like this isn't the action figure, this is the movie that inspired the action figure. It's like, yeah, no, how many like especially in 1995, it was not commonplace for the big screen actor to have also given over their likeness and rights to the action figure character and voice to the action figure character. So it's perfectly fine for me that like but the character Buzz Lightyear sounds like Chris Evans and the toy Buzz Lightyear sounds like Tim Allen. That's fine. I was not
I
lacking
don't know. I
anything in
felt
that front.
For me, I felt like that was a very deliberate, intentional thing to say. Do not expect this to be the action figure Buzz.
Yeah. Yep.
which is what that conveyed to me from the previews. I'm like, oh, it's not Tim Allen. Oh, this is and my because I didn't know anything about the premise, but the moment they're like, I realized it's not Tim Allen. I'm like, oh, this is a whole different kind of Buzz Lightyear thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And like that's what piqued my interest about it. Like that's what that immediately sent the message to me. So I don't like I can understand why you wouldn't want Tim Allen
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah. There have been, like, a whole bunch of people kinda, like, raising the questions of, like, "Oh, they've canceled Tim Allen." It's like, "No, they haven't. They have not canceled Tim Allen." This last week, they released the promotional photo for The Santa Clauses, a new Disney Plus series that's gonna be coming out that's based off of the Santa Claus movies. So, like, they're still quite happy to continue working with Tim Allen, despite him just going further and further right and doing all that nonsense. So it wasn't about canceling Tim Allen at all. So, but yeah, I thought Chris Evans was fun. I think Chris Evans captures like the um, sometimes very innate buffoonery of what Tim Allen was bringing to the character originally. And there are again just definitely a lot of echoes between the character we know from the Toy Story series and this version of Buzz Lightyear, in fun and interesting ways. There were definitely a lot of moments where like I had that like Leonardo DiCaprio like pointing at the thing kind of reaction of like he said the thing or he did the thing or I remember them doing that thing and that's what this is in reference to. Like there were definitely a lot of those kinds of things. And while I wasn't doing it in the like physical pointing at the camera, like that's definitely the sentiment and the emotion I had as I would just laugh uproariously at a thing that happened on screen. Um, so yeah, lots of fun. Just doesn't quite like it's definitely like worth your time. It was also fascinating in the context of this being the first Pixar movie back to theaters
Mm-hmm.
after since Onward like launched right before the pandemic and basically like its theatrical run was cut short because of the pandemic, and then we had Luca and Soul and Turning Red all straight to Disney Plus. This one might have been even better served more as a like I know like I'm not alone in thinking this, but like I would have rather Turning Red been swapped for this and Turning Red
Mm-hmm.
got the big theatrical release and Lightyear gets the Disney Plus treatment. But at the same time, I think much like we've seen with like Encanto. Like Encanto had a theatrical run, but it really blew up when it hit Disney Plus, and that's when everybody was
Mm-hmm.
talking about We Don't Talk About Bruno. And so I think this much in the same way, like I mean, based on kind of initial box office, um, I think there's a potential where like yeah, families are just going to kind of wait for this one on Disney Plus, and then they'll be selling socks toys and getting them off the shelves and it'll be like the must-have toy this Christmas kind of thing is a fun robot socks or something. But um, yeah, it was a fun movie. Just didn't hit the peaks of what Pixar has spoiled us with so many times before.
Yeah.
Um, so let's throw it back over to you from one branch of sci-fi to a completely other. Let's talk about Stranger Things season 4, part
Yeah.
1. Cam.
So this is an interesting time. They split up season 4 into a volume 1, volume 2. And I think it was a good thing they did that for a couple of reasons. One, um, so its initial 8 episodes, and I don't know how much the back half is,
I think the back half
but
is like 2, but they're both like feature length film in length.
okay, that makes sense. I will say, like, because the cast has gotten so large and because the cast is gotten so separated, like majority of the cast is in Hawkins, and then a chunk of the cast is on the
Is
West
in Russia
Coast.
or yeah.
Oh
Or
no, it's on yeah,
oh,
it was on the West Coast, and then it transitions into part of that West Coast cast going off to Russia.
okay.
So you have three completely separate locations, and they're actually telling three totally different kinds of stories. You have the stuff going on in Hawkins that kind of fulfills that small town horror teenage film vibes. You have the what's going on the West Coast fulfilling the kind of like government conspiracy vibes, and then the kind of Russian military commie 80s villain stuff you have being fulfilled in Russia this time. Rather than them condensing all of that into, I think season 3 had the most of a um, like one of those lacking. Like there was a lack of government conspiracy in season 3. In season 2, there was a lack of like they didn't have the commie thing going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
season 3 or season. I watched season 2, and then season 3 came, and I just like it came and went, and I never like bothered seeing it. Like the images I remember seeing of season 3 were like the girl in the sailor outfit thing or whatever, whatever that little thing
her name's
is.
Robin, and she's a fucking badass. Fucking love her.
Very cool.
Holy shit, she's cool.
But yeah, like
Um,
I just like I fell off that show. And so
I think a
like
lot of people did
when it
season.
came back this year and it was like season 4 finally here kind of thing, I was like, it's only season 4. I've only missed one season of this show. Wow, okay.
They took a very long break between season 3 and 4.
Yeah. And
Um,
then obviously
they
in part because of a pandemic for a
yeah
couple
they
years.
they didn't start shooting before the pandemic, so there was nothing to be interrupted. But at
Hmm.
the same time, they couldn't come back to it until after it was safe to. And that's also part of the reason why they're like, hey, let's go ahead and like not have everybody like have a cast of like 15 or 20 people all together in like small rooms and stuff. Um, I'm sure that was part of it. But I think that what they've done with this is the Stranger Things world has gotten so much bigger than just Hawkins. And like the government being kind of like this like spooky outside source doesn't necessarily fit anymore. And so what they've done is they've really turned it into a encounters of the third kind, uh sort of like very brutal government uh dealing with Eleven's story and kind of like her peeling back the mysteries of her past in a way that like, oh, she was an experiment and she was in a lab and stuff. And this does is it says there like you everybody's always had so many theories about what that experiment, the full breadth of the experiment was like why was she number 11, who came before 11, and all this sorts of stuff, and they peel that back by a big layer, and it ties into what's going on now in Hawkins, and like there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's very very cool. I really super dug it because it's a very different kind of monster this time around. It's a very different kind of scariness this time, and it's done in a way that feels very that's very good. I think that it's extremely good. I'm very excited to see where things converge for these last 2 episodes. Um, like like stuff is getting pretty intense at this point. And they left it on a pretty big cliffhanger. So I'm stoked to see where we go.
Cool. I love like even though I'm not following along, I've seen because of how much I've gotten into obviously D20 and like the recent Critical Role Calamity like short. I'm getting like a lot more D&D videos served to me in like YouTube recommendations and stuff, and I've seen a lot of things talking about Vecna recently, and looking through like the episodes here, I'm like, oh, and Vecna is also the like the big bad of this season maybe, or something like that,
Right.
and being like, oh,
So
that's right, like the Demogorgon was like named the
mhm.
Demogorgon because of a D&D thing. And so I love that like that has continued the through line over the course of the series of like D&D influencing how these kids are
Yeah.
talking about these crazy monster things.
Well, it's how they name them. Like, and it's such a brilliant maneuver to do because in the first one it's Demogorgon. Season 2 and 3 was the Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
Which I think is also why season 3 was kind of weaker for a lot of people, is because it was the same villain from season 2. Although it came back in a much more brutal and terrible way. Uh, that was most excellent. Big fan of how like that season has a weak start, but it like how it finishes and it climaxes is super. Moving into season 4, like yeah, and so it's like, hey, what other D&D thing can we use here? And they use Vecna, and if anybody who knows D&D lore, there's a reason they choose Vecna. And the reason they choose Vecna is very apt, and it's great because I love it because they're always like, it's the Demogorgon or it's the Mind Flayer. And it's like, these aren't the names of the things or the creatures or the people. It's just the like identities these teens have assigned it based off of their D&D game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's played this one time around, it's played up extremely well.
Nice.
So it like, and it's done. Also shout out to Eddie Munson who is the one of the new characters introduced this season. He is the high school DM for the Hawkins teens, the nerds, formerly of the AV club at their junior high. Now they're in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy who leads the D&D club called the Hellfire Club as
Yeah.
a nod to X-Men.
Yeah.
Is Eddie Munson, and he is a like really funny but cool and considerate and emotionally like resonant character that they introduce.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's very very cool. I highly, if you anybody who hasn't gotten back into season 3, hop back into season 3, binge through it, get into season 4, binge through it. That's what I did, and I've had a blast the last couple weeks.
Nice. Is Eddie Munson? Yeah. Oh, so that's the character. Got it. Okay. Because I was
Yeah.
like, wait, is Eddie Munson the actor's name or the character? And then also the whole. I'm thinking Eddie Munson, and I'm realizing, oh, I'm thinking Eddie Munster from the
Munster.
Munsters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing they make that joke or something. If they don't,
They don't.
That
don't
seems
make that
weird. But I guess maybe in the 80s that hadn't like reached a point of revivalism or whatever because of Nick at Night or something. Like when I grew up watching The Munsters because I was watching it on Nick at Night.
And that show came out in the 50s, Trevor.
I'm aware, yes, but like so much of Stranger Things is absolutely like dabbling in nostalgia. Don't tell me that nobody would be like, oh, that's almost like Eddie Munster from the Munsters, especially in a weird world where like sci-fi is real.
Yeah, the things that happen around Eddie Munson kind of make it like that would be a moot point to bring.
All right, that's fair. Well, very cool. I've also seen the only other thing I've seen really from season 4 is a Kate Bush song apparently like reaching to the top of the charts because it was featured in the series, and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go check out that song on Spotify now." It's like
it's a great song. Kate Bush absolutely rules,
Yeah.
and it does play an important part in early parts of the show. And however, that also leads into a very interesting theory that some people have had concerning Will. So the idea is basically Running Up That Hill is one of the characters Max's favorite song, and that's why it's used. That's why she uses it. And however, people have noticed a very interesting tie-in to Will Byers in season 1. Apparently, was able to the Demogorgon that we think kidnapped him was apparently staved off after he started singing his favorite song. So some people are like, maybe like there's some interesting like theories going on right now that I really hope are true, because it would make things a lot more interesting for why, because Will and 11 have been the two characters most tied to sci-fi horror things happening to them.
Yeah, the Upside Down.
11, yeah, the Upside Down and everything. 11 being the person who can open a gate to it, but as well as being like her entire experiment revolving around it. And then also on the flip side, Will being abducted into it, surviving, and then being possessed by the Mind Flayer, still to this day having a connection to the Upside Down at some level. And so at the end of season 3, they kind of get like they are forced to basically season 3 to season 4, they become much closer as far as friends and proximity and everything else, because of the circumstances of how season 3 ends. And so it's very like seeing how they've grown together as basically family, and kind of like looking out for each other. It's been very cool to see how that interacts, especially with Mike being 11's boyfriend and Will's best friend, how they kind of like have run into some conflict as well. It's the acting by these young kids who started off, being young children and then coming into their own as adult actors, has been super cool to see. And it's been very awesome to see kind of like how they've engaged with their fans and enjoyed their time.
Cool. And also, it would I imagine it would be very satisfying if those like theories are paying off of like the favorite song element, and that's where they put their creative juices. Because as I saw also floating around, they did also just forget Will's birthday in the series. So, oops, poor Will.
Yeah, here's the thing though, that totally fits with Will's like his life and his character.
Yeah,
is
he's just a little sad boy.
Well, considering like what's going on and happening around the time of his birthday, it's not that surprising.
Yeah.
Like things get pretty intense with what's going on. So if it wouldn't be surprised me if in the one that found out is everyone was like, oh wait, Will, wasn't it your birthday? And it just being like yeah, a lot's been going on though, so like it's fine.
Cool. Any final thoughts on Stranger Things Volume 4? It looks like the part 2 drops
Next
on
week.
Friday. Yeah, so
Yep.
you'll get your resolution there. And then is it like like part 2 is not the end of the series, right? It's
No.
presumably still continuing on.
I think they have another season. I do not believe this is the last season. However, it literally could be. I don't know. Let me see here if Stranger
Things season 5 ?
Yeah, 5.
It is fascinating because like Netflix definitely recently, especially, has been on a run of like 3 seasons and we're done. And the fact that this one continues
Stranger Things is ending with season 5.
Okay, there you go.
So
cool.
this is not season 5 that's coming up.
Right.
This is season 4, part 2.
Yep.
But season 5 will be the last one, and apparently there's already a spinoff.
Huh.
So things are transitioning to a close on this story, and then a new story happens. So,
yeah, let's do a one shot or a side campaign. All that fun stuff. Cool.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Well, then we will wrap up here with my thoughts on Elvis, which I went and saw the other day.
Tell me about Elvis, dude. I'm super curious. This movie, the trailers are very wonky, so I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, it's so like just as my kind of background with Elvis, I grew up in a household like my parents love Elvis. My mom had for many years a like portrait, a painted portrait of Elvis that was probably like 24 by 36 like large, like 24 inches wide at least, maybe 3 feet by like 4 or 5. Like it was the showpiece of one of the like rooms of the house when I was growing up. And it was like this weird thing as I grew older, like learned more of the backstory thing, because it was given to her by like an ex-boyfriend of hers who like my parents still like were in touch with and like would go bowling with. And then I found out years later that he had actually proposed to her at one point and she'd shot him down. And I was like, this is extra weird now that we've had this like love gift from that guy in our house for all these years. But parents love Elvis.
Your dad doesn't care. He won in the end.
Exactly.
And he gets a massive cool picture of Elvis.
Yeah. But apart from that, like I was definitely very fuzzy on like details of Elvis's life and whatnot. And like it was like obviously I know like the big broad strokes of like obviously like sex appeal, rock and roll, kind of taking and blending like Afro-American kind of culture with country and like really launching into like 50s rock and roll, and changing it and sexifying everything, and then like his later Vegas years and stuff like that. The movie is go ahead.
So you weren't aware of his origins then?
Not particularly, no. No, yeah, I would say like in the same way, like this movie, the most direct parallel I'll draw to this is like the Freddie Mercury, the Bohemian Rhapsody documentary a couple years ago. It is very much kind of in that same vein of, it is a look at Elvis's character, with the twist of this being so much of the story is told through the eyes of Colonel Tom Parker, which is portrayed by Tom Hanks in this, which is a very odd framing device. But then at the same point, like the Baz Luhrmann effect of this movie is in full effect, and it has like shades of R&J and shades of Moulin Rouge, where it's like we're seeing our hero, our protagonist, but sometimes through the eyes of like our villain and our our less savory character. And it definitely like it is largely chronological in its telling of the story. So like we get, I guess, like we're introduced to Elvis like as he's in his late teens, early 20s or whatever, going out on his first tour and stuff like that, but we get flashes back to his childhood.
Okay.
going and like little glimpses of him in in effectively like affordable housing projects kind of thing, going to like black southern revivalist churches and stuff like that, and a lot is made early on of like his fascination and love of Captain Marvel Jr., aka would now be like Shazam Jr., that version of Captain Marvel, not the Marvel version of Captain Marvel. um uh and yeah, it's like, I mean, the big takeaway from this is Austin Butler. If he does not win the Oscar for this performance, then some other performance will have come in and completely blown the Academy away, because this seems like the most Oscar baity kind of performance of all, and is great. Like, he is phenomenal in it. He's doing a lot of the singing, as well as obviously the acting and performance and stuff, and very much like encapsulates the the swagger of Elvis and the performance and and everything. The movie does it definitely embraces like Elvis's love and connection to African American culture of the era, and like he's out there like listening to songs on Beale Street, and that's where like the movie shows us hearing Hound Dog, and then he later goes on and would kind of make Hound Dog a global phenomenon kind of thing, um as well as like one of his best friends that we see throughout the movie is his relationship with BB King. um
Hmm.
and so we see him like when he's trying to get away from it all, he kind of like heads off to jazz clubs and kind of just enjoys that. Like he sees a young oh, I forget his name, Rudy Tooty performer, um uh Little Richard.
Okay.
Like we see him like seeing a little, a young Little Richard kind of performing in there, um and yeah, it's just like a lot of time kind of like in his little origin there. And then they kind of like gloss over his down years. There's also like family drama and stuff. And like when he like the political drama is certainly something that the movie leans into, of he was on watch lists because of how sex crazed he was driving the nation's women and stuff like that. And so they play with that a little bit. And the like the basically like they're gonna come down on him, but Colonel Tom Parker sells them on sending him off to Germany, and go and obviously you get that couple of years of Elvis doing his stint in the service, becoming clean cut all American boy. Um, I this is something I didn't know like really before the movie had come out, but in preparation for seeing the movie, I was introduced to the less savory element of he met his wife Priscilla when she was like
Yeah.
14. That
Yep.
doesn't get a ton of play in the movie. That is probably one of the elements of the movie that kind of gets glossed over a little bit. Like they introduce the idea that she was a teenager when he met her, um, but we only get like one or two scenes with her, at that age, and um, then it kind of cuts to like their marriage and the next part of Elvis's career kind of thing being the movies of the '60s. Um,
Okay, so they don't focus on the fact that like yeah he
yeah, no, they don't dive into the fact that like yeah, the age difference and specifically how young she was when when they met, um, uh, or how young she was still when they got married compared to him, and that element. That is definitely like in the same way that like Bohemian Rhapsody glosses over some like very big complications with the band and all that stuff. This movie very much is like, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the icon of Elvis, not the weaker element. Um, and then they throw throughout the movie, they kind of like put it in historical context of you know showing him reacting to the death of Martin Luther King Jr., showing him reacting to the death of Bobby Kennedy, and how he wants to react in response to that, but he's constantly kept under the thumb of Colonel Tom Parker, and basically like dissuaded from making some of those moves and being more like political than maybe he wanted to be. And I don't know how much of that is like the real Elvis versus like dramatization of the character. Um, but yeah, like Austin Butler, phenomenal throughout this. And then like really kind of gets to do an extra fun showcase kind of in the closing, arc of the movie of his comeback and his stint in Vegas. And it's like tinged with this tragedy of he talks about wanting to go on, global tours and see the world and stuff. But he gets locked into performing in Vegas year after year after year. Through, again, maybe shady managing deals. And so, yeah, it's like in those moments we get to see him, shine as the showman that he was, but also this is where like the struggles with addiction and stuff are also flaring up like wild, and his personal life is falling apart. And so it's definitely throwing a lot at you in kind of the final chapter of the story, which is I think where that's where like the real big grandiose Baz Luhrmann style really comes in and shines, is in these Vegas sequences. Because there's definitely a lot of this where it's like this, knowing how much I love like Moulin Rouge and Shakespeare's R&J, like I never saw Great Gatsby, but there are definitely moments of this where I'm like, oh, that's like the grand lavishness that I could see Baz Luhrmann putting into a Great
Mhm.
Gatsby kind of film. But a lot of this is much more on the straightforward side. The music is, I will say, maybe the one area where he kind of explores, because even as we're seeing kind of these old, like him in 50s and 60s Beale Street, when we're seeing a lot of these kind of setup shots, the music is intercut with like Elvis remixes with like modern day hip hop kind of stuff as like the
Interesting.
soundtrack.
Okay.
So that's where you get kind of like in R&J you had like this juxtaposition of like the modern and the classic, and same with like obviously Moulin Rouge. So I think that's where you get kind of that flavor. But like for the most part, performances are played straight. It is Austin Butler as Elvis, just doing the Elvis songs and doing the Elvis performances, and doing them incredibly well. And it's not like Moulin Rouge of like, okay, now he's going to sing a completely anachronistic song or something like that. When that anachronism happens, it's background music for an establishing shot or something like that. But yeah, it was definitely cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed just knowing. I think the most I'm taking away from it is knowing how much like he maybe got taken advantage of, in
Oh
particular
yeah.
by Colonel Tom Parker, but also by like his family and like the people around him that were maybe like mooching off of him in that like that way we kind of like now almost expect like from Entourage type situations. But not knowing his story as much, I just didn't see it, or I didn't see that coming, or those elements of it coming. And in that regard, like I really hated Tom Hanks in this movie, and that is that is a testament to some really good like acting and script work that like Tom Hanks, everybody's like favorite lovable dad slash uncle slash grandpa or whatever, like the fact that I loathed him so much, and like all of the gaslighty shit that he was pulling off by the end of
Uh-huh.
this movie, I was like, I so hope we get to see like a terrible comeuppance from you, Colonel Tom Parker. And fortunately, like the movie kind of ends with that like, you know, here's like, here's what happened to these characters kind of thing. And talks about like Tom Parker, dying destitute, suffering from like his gambling addiction stuff in, in Vegas in the late 90s, where like, while Elvis remains like the number one selling solo artist of all time kind of thing. And it's like, cool. Yeah. Fuck you, Colonel Tom Parker. um,
Yeah. There's a lot. Things
and
that people don't. Yeah. So go ahead.
like the movie kind of touches on like it's definitely a thing like I was curious enough about this character to like just Wikipedia him after the after the fact, because the movie kind of touches on this idea like he's at one point he's in this like smoke-filled room with like government officials kind of like confronting him about what he needs to do with his client Elvis to stay, in our good graces and stuff. And you find out like this illusion of like there was no Colonel Tom Parker. Tom Parker is not your real name. And it's like, but they don't get into like what his actual backstory is. They talk about him as the snowman is constantly what Elvis is calling him, and he's basically like a carny con man, kind of like
Hmm.
that's the setup they introduced for him, that he made his way from carny life to basically like promoting the biggest act in the world. And then they circle back around to that a little bit later on when Elvis wants to go on these like global tours and stuff, and Parker's constantly like insisting that he stay, stay local, can't go overseas, doesn't go overseas. And it's brought up the idea of like he can't like Colonel Tom can't go overseas because he doesn't have a passport because he's an immigrant, or it's not as like he's a fake identity or something like that. So like they dabble with that a little bit, but they don't like. It wasn't until going into Wikipedia that like I found out his actual like origins and a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a moment in the film, a dramatized moment where like Elvis fires him, and then uh uh Colonel Tom Parker retaliates by saying like, well, here's everything that Elvis Presley Enterprises owes me for the last 30 years. And he starts like itemizing things going back to like 1955, and basically like gives Elvis and his dad a bill for like $9 million or whatever it was. And it's like, fuck this guy, fuck this guy through the roof, and for clearly taking advantage of non-business savvy people, and all that shit.
Yeah.
And the movie, like in the little epilogue placards, it kind of touches on like, you know, in the years following Elvis's passing, like there were lawsuits that came out that or that proved and identified the unethical treatment of Elvis Presley by Colonel Tom Parker, and basically like the Graceland estate. It's also fascinating for me just in a weird like meta contextual thing, because Graceland is actually like a client that I support in my day job, like because like
Yeah.
the ticketing software company that I work support for, Graceland uses that ticketing platform. So like I will occasionally see Graceland tickets in our support queue, and reach out and kind of help them with things. So that was a whole fun element of like, oh, that's what Graceland looks like. Cool. Now I have like context for Graceland. But yeah, it definitely delves into seedier elements of Elvis's life. But as any biopic does, it certainly glosses over some elements, or portrays other elements in a very dramatized style. But it was definitely, again, like the thing I will take away from this is Austin Butler is a powerhouse, and this is like a career defining performance for him. And I hope nothing but continued success for this kid, because yeah, he's just real good. um uh and especially like i I think like the two big like award worthy things that are going to come out of this is he's going to get if he doesn't get at least nominated, like if he doesn't win, he should definitely at least get nominated for best actor. Tom Hanks probably will get like a supporting actor kind of legacy nomination, but then also like makeup and prosthetics is probably going to get something for just the weird, like the sometimes unrecognizable makeup that they've put Tom Hanks in throughout the movie, as well as how they age Austin Butler up into older versions of Elvis, where like the only time they use like actual Elvis footage is like intercut at the finale of the movie, where like it's much like, again, Bohemian Rhapsody. Like a lot of the performance is it's Bohemian Rhapsody being like the big Live Aid performance, and you can watch like side by side comparisons. They kind of do those side by side comparisons for like the finale of this movie of Elvis's like final performances, or final performance, where like you see Austin Butler doing it, and they kind of like cut away and show some other kind of stuff, and then they cut back and you see that it is actual Elvis footage of like actual like him actually doing the performance, and it's almost unrecognizable that they like made the switch. So yeah, they do a real good job of kind of transforming him over the different eras of Elvis. So yeah, like makeup and effects, I think will also get a nod for this movie, and probably costume design too, because they definitely have a ton of fun playing with the different looks of Elvis over the eras. So yeah, it's definitely like a movie I'm going to easily recommend to my family, and anybody who like. This is weirdly like this is the most boomer movie I can think of, and I'll be curious because I imagine the boomers that like really love Elvis probably
Hmm.
don't think of the fact that so much of his stuff was pulled from and inspired by African American culture, and the movie does not
Hmm.
shy away from that, and like shows Elvis embracing that, and shows the conflict that people probably like dismiss or don't think about when they think of Elvis. Like the early like the there's one of his concerts is kind of presented in opposition to a segregationist rally that's happening a little while away. That's when, Elvis gets very political and kind of makes a decision to not be the new Elvis that they were trying to rebrand him as. And so yeah, just a like really cool look at the man's
I
life,
will. Yeah.
as well
I
as like his existence as kind of an icon.
I will say so. Here's what my situation. I'm actually a longtime Elvis fan.
Hmm.
I've loved Elvis since I was a kid. Ever since I heard Jailhouse Rock when I was like 5 years old, I've been a fan of Elvis. I did know about that about Elvis's past. I didn't know. Like I am fully aware of all the good and bad things Elvis has potentially done. That being said, I don't think there's enough credence that people give it when they talk about, especially when they talk about Elvis, because it's clear in this movie they've definitely gone the route of showing like Elvis embraced this culture, and like it's true he did. But it's important to note for to you and for anybody listening is that um the socioeconomic situation in southern states was at a point where, depending on how poor your family was, it really didn't matter what color your skin was.
Yeah, and that the movie definitely kind of like plays with that in the introduction of like that's why he was just kind of like ingrained in that culture. Was his family was poor, so he was in the same projects that just were like, like historically lots of
His
black kids.
it's interesting that they show him in the project because in his actual early life, um, it wasn't so much like, and it's interesting that they show that as like housing projects because, in actual Elvis's life, especially when he was a kid, uh, they didn't live in necessarily housing projects because projects really weren't
I'm
established as like kind of
I'm
the.
yeah, sorry. I'm using projects as like the nomenclature in part because I'm also watching The Wire right now.
Oh,
Um
fair. That's fair.
but
Okay.
it is very much like the like prototypical affordable housing options of like what would it be like more akin to what I think of when I think of It's a Wonderful Life, and What's It Town. um uh
We're talking his he Elvis grew up. Elvis said in an interview, he didn't have flooring, like actual flooring in a house until he was a grown up.
mhm.
He grew up with dirt floors. Like and like this is not the like 1800s.
Yeah,
This is a man growing up in the 1930s, 1940s era,
yeah,
where like your family's so poor, you don't have floors.
yeah.
The dirt's your floor. He grew up in a like his family was so unbelievably poor that he grew up in such destitution that he, for all intents and purposes, socioeconomically, he grew up black.
Yeah.
The only thing that gave him an up was his skin color. And so when people talk about him embracing, it's like I don't know if it's so much of embracing that culture as much as identifying that's where your roots are.
Mhm.
Artistically, his roots were black roots, and artistically and socioeconomically, like his rise is. I look at his rise and people are like, oh, he got taken advantage of. I'm like, his story is no different from any black musician of his time, which was being taken advantage by a savvy white businessman and being completely exploited because
Mhm.
it's just done to like such an nth degree because he's Elvis.
Yeah, and they also play with a lot the idea of Colonel Tom Parker as a father, as a second surrogate father to Elvis,
Hmm.
over his lifetime, because his dad like they dabble a lot with his family life. They kind of introduce the idea that his dad had had run-ins with the law earlier in life. His mom, while like his mom being like a good Christian woman kind of thing, not understanding why people don't like what he does because they look at like she looks at what Elvis can do and thinks it's a gift from God kind of thing. But
Mhm.
she drank and worried about her son and drank and worried about her son while he was off on tours, or eventually when he goes off to basic training, and they kind of cut away from basic training and cut back to her passing and her funeral, and how like that's where you get this like really big scene between Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis's dad, where like Elvis's dad clearly isn't like capable of handling the celebrity of Elvis, but b a world where like he's got to be the man of the house. He's like he very much like his wife was kind of the front runner of the house or whatever. And so like so basically like it's another place where yeah, the colonel kind of like comes in, exploits that situation to his benefit to basically say I will be here, I will support your family, I will do everything you need that they need while you are away, Elvis, while you go. And don't give up on this, because if you do, you're like you're everything your mom sacrificed will will have been for nothing kind of
Oh
thing.
my god, that's
Yeah,
so scummy.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh man.
It's yeah, like I mean there's also this framing device throughout where like some of the earliest things we're seeing are um uh basically Colonel Tom at the end of his life looking back on his story with Elvis and stuff. And so like the film is very much framed like he is the narrator of this story. And so it's very again it's very odd that like he's constantly putting himself in a very negative light, but he's also like constantly framing it as like he was trying to help the boy. He's and so like it is that like the villain thinks he's doing the right thing kind of storytelling. But yeah, it's like anybody with a modern sensibility is looking at this being like, no, don't don't sign that, Elvis. Don't sign those things. Don't like he's clearly taking advantage of you. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Um,
Mhm.
but obviously we can't change history. But yeah, it's I mean, again, like stellar central performance, interesting framing and performance there from Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, I don't know enough about the real Colonel Tom Parker. Tom Hanks is constantly doing a very I think it's supposed to be a Dutch accent based on what I know now of Colonel Tom Parker, but it definitely doesn't sound it. It sounds just vaguely ethnic, vaguely like European, Eastern European kind of. Eh. Um, and I guess it's like it is very much like you're not supposed to know what this guy's deal is, and so he's constantly hiding behind that mask. Um, uh, and it's definitely a big choice. It is a big, bold choice for a big, bold Baz Luhrmann movie. I don't know necessarily if I liked it, but I did like how much I loathed him throughout the movie, and especially by the end. Um, so shout out to again for Tom Hanks, stepping up to the plate and embracing being like that despicable, disgusting. I will be very curious. Like I showed my aunt a trailer of this, and like she was moved to tears just from like one of those initial trailers because of how much like she grew up loving Elvis and like seems to want to. And she like the big really selling point of or the big thing that I was like, oh, this might be something special is I was like, it's probably gonna be a long movie and you can't smoke in movie theaters, Aunt Pam. And she was like, I can go 2.5 hours without a cigarette, if this movie's good. So it'll be an interesting thing if I can actually like get the rest of the family to like maybe go come see it with me as a family outing or something. Would have liked to have tried to do that this weekend, but my mom got hit with COVID a couple weeks ago, and then we found out on Father's Day that my dad was testing positive. So like they're still waiting for like COVID to leave the family. Like they're feeling fine, everything, no like bad or lingering
Mhm.
symptoms. So knock on wood, and I'm thankful for that. But like the potential plan would have been to, go take them to see this movie this weekend or something, and it'll unfortunately have to wait until a later date. But yeah, I think they will like it. The most interesting element that I will be curious of their reaction to will be those moments where like anachronistic modern hip hop is playing alongside or remixed with some Elvis songs, kind of as like I'll be very curious like of how they respond to that aspect of the movie as opposed to it being a very straightforward biopic kind of film.
Mhm.
But yeah. Yeah, I definitely recommend it to anybody who's like a fan of Elvis. I think it's an interesting look at the man, the myth, the legend. And yeah, certainly again for me as somebody who wasn't as well versed as you are, certainly opened my eyes to aspects of his life that also kind of like led me to do some additional reading and additional kind of research on to kind of figure out, okay, well, that was what they put on screen. What's the real story like?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's Elvis. Shout out to Austin Butler, just again killing the game in that one. That's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to discuss all these things. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I know we just talked about it at the top of the show, but definitely go check out that Bond show. It's one of our YouTube only selections for you, so there's always going to be a video component to it. Also, check out that nerdysite.com for Logan's kind of reviews of the films. Yeah, just like it's such an awesome project that we were all able to at one point in time be a part of. I don't think that there's a part of that nerdy site that was not at some point that did not have themselves touched on for this movie or for this franchise and this
Jazz
series.
never was able to make or join us for an episode, but
She wasn't. I thought. Oh no, that was Jarrett
yeah,
that was with you guys for that
yeah,
one.
we
Okay.
had Jarrett join us a couple times, and John O'Peck joined us for an episode. But yeah, it was largely me and Logan. You guys, you and Frank came on for Live and Let Die, which was, I believe, remained by the end still our longest episode, just because there were 4 of us on there for one. But yeah, by and large, it was the me and Logan show, with a couple splinter guests here and there.
Was it Jared that was in Casino Royale with you guys?
Yeah, Jared joined us for that one.
Okay, I thought Jazz did Casino Royale. My apologies. So let me rephrase that. Almost all of us had a hand in it and touched on it. That being said, it's still like an awesome series that we were able to do. We kind of launched it alongside Friday Night Dying Light, so we have these 2 concurrent projects going on. And we're wrapping up. We wrapped up one, and we'll be wrapping up another one pretty soon. As far as production wise, episodes will be going out for Friday Night Dying Light for quite some time still.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been cool, and like I'm really interested and focused in like doing another project because I think that these went well. So we'll definitely have a sit down meeting and talk about them.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm as somebody who was driving 4 podcasts a week, I'm ready to take a break for a little while and not do another show anytime soon. But if somebody else wants to kind of drive a project, I'm certainly open to the conversation. But yeah, like there was a conversation on Twitter or something at some point not too long ago that was it like, well, when that Bond show's done, maybe we can do that that Rocky show and do like the Rocky movies into the Creed movies. And I was like, no, just I'm saying right now, no, not gonna happen. I'm not doing it. I sat through like, as much as I'm sure I would love the Creed movies now, I much like the early Bond movies, I do not want to sit through the early Rocky movies, even as they might be good movies. They're still movies of their time that is not necessarily a time I jive with. But yeah, I'm definitely shout out to that Bond show. I'm glad for that that to be done. And I'm not saying like of their time in terms of like racial insensitivity or anything.
Oh, no,
I just don't like older movies. I just don't like
fair.
movies
That's
from
fair.
the movies from the 70s and 80s is very rare that like I'm like, yeah, this was a good time. There's just been an evolution in filmmaking that my biggest issues with a lot of the early Bond stuff was just like, I just don't like a lot of the slow pacing and action or whatever of these movies, let alone how badly written some of them were. It was just different times. But yeah, it was definitely a project I will be proud of, and I'm glad to have taken part in. But I'm also like, much like Daniel Craig at times, I'm ready to never talk about Bond again. um,
Listen,
uh,
I'm not talking about I'm going to be doing a Let's Play series like this anytime soon.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I feel I'm there with you, man.
Yeah.
I'm there with you.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot there. Like it has been a lot. Like what people have seen versus like what I've had to do in like background stuff, and also like yeah, there's stuff I found out about some stuff episodes, upcoming episodes like that. I'm just like not happy about because
Mhm.
of like how some things went down, with like tech wise. So
Okay. Fun. Looking forward to hearing about that.
yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's gonna do it for Cam there. You can follow me at Trevor J Starkey on Twitter. I will give a shout out to I mentioned it early in the show. Actually, I want to give a shout out to the Castle Vault podcast. I'm gonna be on there a Goofy Movie episode Monday night. So basically the night this episode goes live. This is a podcast I've been looking forward to from them for 2+ years now. Basically, like, as soon as they announced that they were doing a Disney Plus podcast, and their framework has been watching through and ranking all of the Disney animation movies, and then all of the Pixar movies, and then all of the MCU movies, and now they're doing all of the like was it Disney Toons animation or something like that, which is finally where a Goofy movie is coming into the mix. Like, I wanted to do a Goofy movie a couple years ago when I thought it would be in their like full regular animation run. So I'm looking forward to reuniting with them for that episode. So go check that out at the Disney Vault on Twitter. That episode will be recorded and then probably go live later in the evening on Monday. So go check that out. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us. As Cameron referred to, Logan basically did companion reviews for every episode of that Bond show, and I believe he's still planning on doing like a couple more follow-up, like all-encompassing, here were the best gadgets, here were the best villains, those kinds of like his rankings on a lot of those things. So stay tuned for any of those other things that come out. Yeah. You can find all of us. Yeah, all that I already said. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you again, Cam, for joining me. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.